So Jay and Edwin, you're all ready to go? Okay,
Yes.
fantastic. So hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. This is our final It's a Science webinar for fall quarter. We're really pleased to be welcoming Jay Stemmle and Edwin Feliciano, our wonderful campus experts, to talk to us about anxiety, study drugs, test skills, and academic strategies. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Feliciano, and he will take it from here. We're gonna, the order of the evening is Dr. Feliciano will start, and then Jay Stemmle will go on with some CLAS strategies and other expertise, and then we'll hopefully leave some time at the end for questions. But please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and we will be happy to answer them, chat or the Q&A. We'll monitor both. And we'll be happy to jump in and answer your questions. So Dr. Feliciano, take it away.
Thank you, Jackie, for the kind introduction. Can we move to the next slide? So some of the guidelines here, this is going to be recorded. Ask questions using the Q&A box. You can raise your hand too if you want to ask a question or add a comment. And we're going to allocate some time at the end for questions. Next one. These are the learning objectives for tonight. Understanding the psychoactive properties of stimulants, distinguishing between the myths and facts of the study drugs, learn effective study skills and strategies, and identify campus resources and support systems. Next one. Thank you, everybody, for being here today and taking time of your evening to spend some time with us. So I'm going to start first with doing a quick review of the actual diagnostic criteria for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The set of criteria, I just have two examples here. There's two basic categories in the diagnostic criteria. One is the inattention category. There's a number of symptoms that actually identify the deficiencies that a person may have in functioning when it comes to attention span. The other category is the hyperactivity and impulsivity. One thing that I wanted to mention about the diagnostic classification that we use as clinicians in mental health is that when you look at many of these conditions, the symptoms actually are based on human behavior, correct? So when you read about these diagnostic criteria, many times you look at them and a simple set of symptoms may be something that you experience, and you don't necessarily meet the diagnostic criteria for a disorder. For example, these two examples that I have here quoted from the diagnostic classification, if you see the first word is often. So that's one issue to take into account when you're talking about the symptoms, correct? I may have difficult to pay close attention to details and make some careless mistakes during the day, but maybe that doesn't happen to me as often as it happens to somebody who has the diagnosis. If I am in a lecture for a long time, I'm sure I will be tapping my hands or my feet and moving in my seat quite a bit. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's happened often enough to interfere with my functioning. So again, this diagnostic criteria symptoms are based on human behavior, and many of them we just really experience on a daily basis, but not to the degree that will cause impairment. Next slide, please. Thank you. These are some other conditions used to categorize the diagnosis. The symptoms have to be present before the age of 12. They have to be present in 2 or more settings. So if there's a particular setting that actually causes you to have trouble paying attention or being restless, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have the condition. It's something that can actually be noticed to be in one or more than one setting. So in a classroom, at home, when you're going out with friends, things of that nature. And again, I mentioned earlier that the symptoms have to interfere with or reduce the quality of your social, school, or work functioning. So this is that criteria that is present in all the diagnoses in the manual that we utilize to classify psychiatric conditions, there's significant impairment in your ability to actually do work. And then the symptoms are not better explained by another mental disorder. And this is important to know because symptoms of inattention, decreased concentration, lacking motivation, not having energy are not necessarily just symptoms that are present with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When somebody's experiencing depression, anxiety, and many other psychiatric conditions, these symptoms can also be present. Next slide. Thank you. So some statistics and known facts. The prevalence of ADHD in the age group of 18 to 44, which is pretty large, is about 4 to 5%. Many of you who have done statistics know prevalence means how many people have it in a given moment. Another important fact is to know that in individuals who suffer from ADHD, it has been proven by research that stimulants are considered to be the first-line treatment. Medications used for ADHD compared to other treatment strategies have been measured in controlled settings, and stimulants have shown superior efficacy than other treatment modalities. I want to say that with caution because in my practice, I always emphasize the fact that multi-approach to a particular condition is what yields best results. Yet, I want to make sure that I mentioned that the research actually shows that the stimulants are very superior to other modalities. Stimulants are categorized as Schedule II medications because of their high abuse potential and dependence. And I'll tell you a little bit about this. The agency that regulates the categorization of controlled substances, the Drug Enforcement Administration, known as the DEA, has 5 categories for substances that have potential for abuse. Category 1 to 5. Category 1 are the most restrictive medications and compounds that are not necessarily known to have a medical benefit and have a very high potential for abuse. For example, category 1 is also known as the schedules, schedule 1 through 5. Schedule 1 heroin is categorized as schedule 1 drug. On schedule 2, you will have cocaine, methadone, oxycodone. On schedule 3, you will have anabolic steroids and ketamine. Schedule 4, you will have medications like benzodiazepines, Xanax, Valium. And schedule 5 will have some cough preparations that have codeine in them. Again, stimulants are categorized as schedule 2, which is pretty high up there. In the United States, the use of stimulants have increased very significantly for 10 years from 2006 to 2016, 2.5-fold. There are probably many explanations for this increase. One is that we have gotten better at diagnosing the condition in the adult population. ADHD is something that was really well known to fall within the pediatrics field, and child psychiatrists actually making this diagnosis more commonly. But with time, we have realized that adults actually suffer from ADHD, and it shows in somewhat different ways from in children, but to the point that it still impairs a person's functioning very significantly and requires treatment. Another reason is that prescribers probably have gotten more comfortable with prescribing these Schedule II substances, feeling reassured by research showing that they're fairly safe when used properly in treating ADHD. How do they work? Well, they basically increase the activity in the brain of 2 main chemicals, dopamine and norepinephrine. Dopamine, you probably know this, is the system in the brain that is involved in rewarding experiences. The norepinephrine system is what is involved in the fight or flight response. And I want you to remember this because I'm going to talk a little more about side effects, potential side effects of these medications. And norepinephrine plays a big role in what a person may experience when they're misusing stimulants. And basically, prescription stimulants increase the alertness, attention, and energy. Next slide. These medications are not new. They have been in the market for a very long time, predating the 50s when it became an issue of the DEA regulating these substances more tightly. Before then, it was widely known that these stimulants were used in World War II to enhance the ability of personnel to be able to just stay in combat for longer and not have to sleep. It has been advertised and sold as diet medications that help lose weight. Also, when people have jobs, and in certain decades, it was known that this was a preferred substance for truckers that were actually just making long trips to be able to just meet deadlines and stay up through the night. So they're a well-known group of medications. Actually, something that I find interesting about psychostimulants is that there's more formulations of psychostimulants than there are of any other kind of medications in medicine. I have an example here in this table, if you can see it. All these are long-acting stimulants, but you can see all the different names there. On the first column, we have the generic name for the medications. The middle column is the actual brand name of the medications, and then the last column is how long they last. So as you can see, this group here are considered long-acting stimulants, and you can see how long they can stay in a person's system. There is also the equivalent of these medications in the short-acting form that is also known as the IR form, or immediate release form. Adderall comes in the IR form, and so does Ritalin. Vyvanse is a unique medication in this group because there's quite nothing like it. It's a pro-drug, and what that means basically is that compared to these other drugs, other medications in this list, the medication doesn't become active until it's actually digested in your stomach. That allows for a slower onset of action. It allows us to stay in your system longer. You can see up to 12 hours there of effectiveness. And it's really somewhat of a superior medication, the newest of the group, when it comes to limiting the potential for abuse, given that it doesn't become active unless it hits somebody's digestive system. Next paragraph. Something that I wanted to share with you, this is just, well, this is called It's a Science, correct? So you invited me, so I'm going to put something chemical structure here. But as you can see here, look at this, the similarity between the Adderall, the amphetamine, and the methamphetamine or crystal meth. That little change there, that methyl group is known as, makes that compound so potent and so dangerous. One of the most dangerous drug of abuse that we have is meth. Now, as you can see, Ritalin, methylphenidate, and Adderall, amphetamine, there's different compounds, but they basically have this, in principle, they do the same. They enhance the transmission of dopamine and norepinephrine. Next paragraph, next slide. So some of the potential side effects here. You remember I was telling you about norepinephrine being that fight or flight response chemical. Well, that fight or flight response, if you think about it, it involves you having a high heart rate, feeling alert and ready to go, sweaty palms, feeling incredibly anxious. So this is interesting because when stimulants are misused, one of the things that I see the most commonly represented by students in this case, because I work with students, that's how I'm referring to that population, is this norepinephrine component. People with high blood pressure, people that actually have really high heart rate, that they feel that they're incredibly anxious. Excessive stimulation or use of stimulants and the stimulation that it causes in the norepinephrine system can actually cause cardiac events and even seizures. In the ER, it's known that when you see somebody showing up to the emergency room and they're young, late teens, early 20s, and they have symptoms of cardiovascular compromise, unless there's a low chance that they may have a congenital heart condition, likely that they're using a substance that actually stimulates norepinephrine in a very potent way. And that could be cocaine, that could be stimulants like Adderall. In terms of mood, you will see with misuse of these medications, you will see irritability, anger, anxiety, this perseveration in thinking, obsessive thoughts, and euphoria. Something that I have experienced that is really in my practice is one of the most difficult things to deal with is psychotic symptoms. And I put here paranoia, but it's not necessarily exclusive to that. Psychosis basically means that somebody's contact with reality is broken, that the person actually is experiencing hallucinations or delusions, things that are not real. And I've seen students that actually with misusing stimulants have developed psychotic symptoms. Research actually shows that it happens in 1 out of about 600 patients, so it is not that uncommon. And when I see it, it's incredibly traumatic for the students and the families. Sometimes it leads to taking like very significant time off to be recovering from this condition. It doesn't resolve very quickly. It's almost like treating somebody who develops schizophrenia. Substance use disorders, like addiction, can develop with misuse of these conditions. And then when you stop using these medications after you have used them for extended amount of times in high amounts, you're going to have the opposite of that norepinephrine stimulation and dopamine stimulation, which is fatigue. You're going to feel tired, depressed. You're going to have apathy. Probably one of the most important effects of non-prescription use of stimulants is insomnia. And I think everybody in the world probably underestimates the importance of sleep. In the college population, sleep is incredibly crucial for academic performance and long-term learning. Studies actually show that sleep improves memory retention and consolidation, so critical to actually have good sleep. Next slide. So performance enhancement drugs, correct? So this is how stimulants are basically labeled in our community. It will help you do better. It's not true. I'm going to cut to the chase. If you do have a deficiency in dopamine and deficiency in norepinephrine in certain areas of the brain, particularly in the frontal area of your brain, where attention span, organizational skills are based, treating ADHD with stimulants is going to work really well because it's going to supply those areas of the brain with those chemicals that are lacking or in low amounts. If you have a normal average transmission of those chemicals, enhancing those are likely to give you side effects, make you feel wired, and not necessarily improve your ability to actually memorize or do any better. So there's a myth here that stimulants actually are performance enhancers, and therefore they can be beneficial to students who are struggling during final exams and midterms. That's one of the most commonly common times that we use the misuse of these substances. Now, what we have seen in research actually is that it's interesting when you look at who is actually misusing stimulants. Well, most students that actually are misusing stimulants are likely to be meeting criteria for other substance dependence and alcohol use than other students. Are probably more likely students that are struggling academically, and they feel that this actually could be of help when they feel this intense academic pressure because they have not been able to prepare. Research actually have done studies very specifically on who actually uses these drugs when they're not prescribed to them, and students tend to skip class more frequently. There are students that actually spend less time studying. So the bottom line, really, I was saying I will cut to the chase with this is there's actually even one study specifically addressing GPA. Does it improve with the use of stimulants when they're not prescribed for ADHD? And no, it doesn't get better. Actually, to some degree, it does get worse because with time, the other consequences, emotional consequences, the physical consequences, the insomnia really end up affecting performance in the long term. Next slide. And this is my last slide. Actually, Um, COVID-19, I just wanted to make a comment about this. It has been challenging to all of us. It is causing increased stress, anxiety, it's causing sleep difficulties on every population. It's one of the situations worldwide in history that is really impacting every single person. The changes in routine and structure have been really incredible. Structure and routine are really what drive good performance. And when we are unable to establish those, it takes a toll on us eventually. So this is true that individuals who actually are already experiencing mental health challenges are going to be encountering more barriers to performing well. But the truth is that this is actually just a problem that is impacting everybody. And the reason why I'm mentioning this, because this is when drugs, alcohol, and stimulants become then a potentially the increase irresponsible use of these substances increases. When you're thinking that a substitute for structure and a good routine and good sleep is going to be using a stimulant to be able to get through, it's probably just going to make things worse in the long run. But again, I want to acknowledge that it's having an impact on everybody. And I think that's my segment. Thank you, and I'll pass it on to Jay.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jay. I work at Campus Learning Assistance Services. That was really interesting, Edwin. And I have heard that thing before about that these were the pharmaceuticals that were used specifically by the Nazi soldiers to stay awake. And yeah, that I did not know that was the same drug. So that was an interesting historical fact. So I work at CLAS. What I do is I am a student academic specialist, and I help students with academic skills across the board. So anything going on in your academic or intellectual life. And I'm really happy to be able to talk to you about focus and to talk about some things that can be done other than doing taking Adderall inappropriately or doing things like this. So let me go ahead and I'm going to share screen with y'all because I work on Prezi, so a different situation. Here we are. Okay, you all should be able to see my screen now. I may stop from time to time to ask you all to participate. Is there a way for students just to unmute themselves and shout out questions or comments? This can happen in this room, right?
Yep, I think we can.
All right, that's what I want to hear. Okay, so to start off, I want to sort of break down the problem here. Let me see if I can get this working right. Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. Sorry about that, everybody. You'd think I'd be a pro by now. Okay, all right, so the first thing I want to do is I need to make clear I am not an education professor. I am a practitioner, and so some of the things that I know about this or that I think I know about it are coming basically because I've been talking to students at UCSB for the last 16 years, and also I do some research, and also within the sphere of academic skills as something that gets attended to at university campuses, a lot of stuff gets passed down by what we would call, in a sexist phrase, I believe, old wives' tales. But some of them are really good, and some of them I still work with. But those things I want to say up front, everybody give them a try and take it with a grain of salt. The other thing is, I like to take a systems approach to most academic skills problems, which is we've got a system here, and we've got to figure out what breaks down in the system, what part of it, because education and learning is really complicated. So we've got to do some investigation to figure out where is this system breaking down, and that's the approach I take to focus. So we're going to start with this idea. This is where the old wives' tale begins. So this was something that was passed down to me from my very first boss at CLAS. Okay, so She basically said, well, we can look at focus problems by breaking it down into two areas, the internal and the external, okay? That we're gonna be looking at types of distraction, or what they call attention capture, okay? So, you know, because that's really what we're talking about with focus, is what makes us distracted. When we go to sit down at our desks to get something done, what makes us get back up and do something else? What makes us, as we are reading or as we're listening to a lecture, sort of lose focus and think about something else. It looks like I've got a chat here. Or not. Okay, I thought I had it. All right, so the ones that are easiest there it is. The ones that are easiest for us all to put our hands on and to really understand around what distracts us from our work are all of these external distractions. So these are my particular external distractions, my personal ones. These are things that if I'm in the presence of one of these things, or if something's wrong with one of these things, for instance, if my fingernails are too long, it drives me crazy. If I forget to have my glasses around my neck, like all of these things will pull me out of attention. So the first thing to do, if you're trying to get some grip on or get some more control over the attention issue, is first of all to identify the external distractions, because those are the easier ones. So can anybody right now, just right off the top of your head, you are aware of what some of your external distractions are? Go ahead and shout those out. I want to hear some student voices in this room. Are you being shy? No one will speak to me. Okay, hold on. I'm going to have to go in here then and look at this list. Oh, here we go. They're in the chat. Okay. Phone. The phone. Yeah, this is a huge one. Oh, they can't speak. It does say that they can't speak. All right. I'm sorry. You can't speak. You're speechless. All you can do is chat.
I'm going through each one and I'm unmuting them. So hopefully people can speak.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Do we use our mics? Okay. Hulu. Okay, and hunger. Okay, so you're exactly on the right track. And the very easy way to start doing an inventory of this for yourself is just think of your 5 senses. I am very visually distracted. Some of you may know, like, you cannot work at a messy desk. I don't like to work at a messy desk. I'm very visually distracted. All the tabs, I have to get rid of all that stuff. So you can go through your visual, your sound. Some people really need silence. Some people, like, they need a little chatter in the background. You can even be concerned about your sense of smell. And some people, studying and focus is actually enhanced by certain smells. So you might want to, if you notice that about yourself, try that out. And this whole thing about your physical sensations. So, like, you know, go through your 5 senses, the physical sensations. If your chair is not comfortable, if you're hungry, if you're thirsty, you want to think about all of these aspects of what can be externally distracting to you, okay? And I cannot stress enough, what would you guess is the number one? Okay, I already have them on here. Can everybody see this? Nobody sees my presentation. Is that what happened?
We see it.
Okay,
Yeah, we
good.
see it.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. I saw something in the chat. Okay. So yeah, I already see it in the chat. Having Wi-Fi at home, having access, the internet, the phone, all of the tabs, social media. This is the number one thing that I hear from students. And it is not irrelevant to the issue of addiction. And I'm going to be circling back around to that in a second. And I don't want to make any huge claims around this, but you know, as somebody who has had some addictions of my own, I can look at my own behavior around the internet and see, oh, this has a similar pattern. And so, you know, when you notice you've got that really like sort of craving relationship to a medium like your phone or whatever, even though I know this stuff is really important, you've got to separate that from your study life. You've got to like partition that off. So making an inventory of what you know, interrupts your focus and doing everything you can to like get those out of your way is the first thing. But the other thing is this wackier thing, and this is really where the old wives' tale, this was like what I learned from my boss, is the internal distractions. So these were ones that the last time I was doing this exercise, this is what came up in my mind. So internal distractions are all of the things, those random thoughts that come in and interrupt you in the middle of your work, they're persistent thoughts. And the more stress that you are under, the more likely these thoughts are going to come in. In fact, they're often involved in your stress. So, I had just read an article about forced labor. So that was popping up in my mind, a call that I had to make. I just spaced out and didn't even realize what was making me space out. So I lost that one. And then I was mulling over something that I had said to somebody earlier in the day. These random thoughts came in. Does anybody have any idea? I mean, that's really tricky. You can do something about these external, you can get your mind around it. You can figure out where the external distraction is coming from. You can do something about that. What on earth can you do about these internal distractions? Does anybody have any ideas about this, or has ever been successful at eliminating the internal distractions?
I guess for me, specifically the spacing out, one way that I get rid of that is by making a goal whenever I start working, to have a goal in mind instead of just telling myself to start working in the first place.
Yes, I think that that is excellent. One of the things that I think is being learned about the educational situation that we're in right now because of distance learning is everybody is taking a hit on motivation. Well, not everybody, but it is very widespread for people to feel far less motivated because, you know, a lot of, you know, how we get motivated seems to have something to do with our social experience in the classroom, which, you know, we don't know a lot about, but there it is. So having, you know, so sitting down and re-engaging with your motivations is really important. David, how do you do that? Do you actually write down, it was you, David, right, who made this comment?
Yeah.
Do you actually write down my goal for right now, or do you stop for a moment and bring it to thought?
I do have some long-term goals written down, but if I'm doing a study session or if I'm trying to take notes on a lecture, then I just reaffirm it in my mind. Okay, this is what I need to do, have a few pages of notes or things like that.
Excellent. Excellent. So you're building the short-term goals and linking them up to the longer goals, like, you know, doing that moment of meditation. I think that that's a really good strategy. Does anybody else have a way that you've been able to get some control over those internal distractions, that sort of, oh, I have 75 pages of reading to do, but, you know, every 4 pages, a thought is popping into my mind that is exogenous to this project. Does anybody have any other strategies that work with this?
For me, kind of similar to David, I would break it into groups where if I have, like you said, 75 pages to read, I'll read 20 and then give myself a break. And so I don't have to think about spacing out, where I can just, buckle down and get through the 20 pages and then give myself a 5-minute break and then get right back into it. And that seems to help me.
Yeah, so you're doing, many of you probably heard of Pomodoro techniques. Okay, so these are ways of creating habit where you get a good sense of how How deep is my focus? Can my focus go to 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 35 minutes? You have a sense of that, and then you set up a system of spans of work followed by short breaks and then followed by longer breaks after you've done a set of these spans of work. These can be really, really helpful also, and I'll get into that a little bit. All right, so this is the main thing right now is to, make sure that you're getting a good sense of these external and internal distractions. This is another technique. Now, at first, as you're doing this, come on. It might seem a little bit strange. Okay, I know I have a lot of tech. This is like the messiest slide I've ever made. I don't know if I don't know if it's making you dizzy looking at this. Okay, so this is the routine. I want everybody, I'm going to be silent for 3 minutes, and we'll just see if this works for 3 minutes. Okay, I want everybody to take out some, like just go to another tab on your screen and take out something that you have to be working on, okay? It might be some pages you've got to read, it might be a homework assignment, it might be notes that you have to go over, and I'm gonna ask you to engage in that work for 3 minutes. What I want you to do is have a small slip of paper, it could be just the back of an envelope sitting next to you. And every time, now, it might not happen in 3 minutes, but for many people it does. Every time a distracting thought, anytime you are anything except for mind melt with your academic material, I want you just to quickly turn to that slip of paper, and I want you to write down a phrase that encapsulates that thought. So, like I had that phrase there, forced labor, right? That was just like, that was the thought that came up in my mind as I was like, had a thought about that article I read. So I want you to do the same thing, all right? So I'm gonna be silent for 3 minutes, and I want everybody to give this a try. If it doesn't happen in 3 minutes, try it again as you're studying this evening and see what it does for you, okay? And then we're gonna talk about it for a minute, all right? Ready, set, go. Okay. So I know it's kind of weird, isn't it? But did anybody get distracted? Did anybody notice that you got distracted, and were you able to like write it? You don't have to tell me what the phrase was. I just want you to say like, if you were able to notice it and what it felt like to like notice it, write it down. Was it easy to do? Was it more distracting to do that?
Yeah, I did get distracted once. I think the hard part was that I was so distracted that I almost forgot to write down, oh, I got distracted.
Okay, so this is a weird practice to do, okay? But what you're trying to do here is notice not only when you get distracted, as quickly as possible, because one of the big problems with being distracted is we'll just not notice it and kind of fly off into some other thought pattern and get far away from the task at hand, right? So it's to notice that it's happening so you can call yourself back to attention, but it's also to start giving some, the reason to write it down is what I put down right here. These things are often very important, even if they're not important, okay? You have to think about these distractions, the internal distractions, is for some reason, these are things in your mind that are crying for your attention. And so they, you know, they're popping up, right? And so you need to, the idea here is to start noticing them, saying hello to them, and then saying later, that these go into a later part of the day. All right, that you're trying to unmesh these different aspects of your life and keep all that other stuff into the break time. So this is one practice you can try to start getting control of that. And in the first stage, you write down little phrases. In the second stage, you replace the phrases and just get in the habit of making a little dot on your page. All right, it's again is the idea to just catch yourself while you were distracted, because I assume that all of you, or at least most of you, have at from time to time gotten distracted, and then suddenly it's 15-20 minutes later that the distractions sort of like build upon themselves. So this is a way of calling yourself back in. All right, let me move on to something else. So those are ways that you can try to control the distractions. But I know that for some of us, it just becomes impossible, that it is inevitable that there will be some internal distractions happening, or maybe even some external distractions happening. Has anybody found, you know, that you are really well aware that that you're going to have a number of different kinds of distractions happening and you have no control over it? You were all so shy tonight.
I think something that like I kind of run into a lot of times, like when I try getting ahead on work, it's not so much I'm getting distracted, it's something more like, oh man, like I could just do this later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's two aspects of the focus issue, and I have trouble disentangling them. So one is, you know, I'm sitting down working, but I can't keep my mind in the game, right? And the other one that you're identifying, Ramon, is I can't sit down to work. I'm distracted before I keep distracting myself from the, you know, so it's sort of like an issue that overlaps with the issue of procrastination, which is a whole other kettle of fish there, or a whole other can of worms. And but I do think that that they're related in some ways. The main thing is, and one of the ways that they're related is in how one of the means of controlling this. Okay, so I'm going to get into this in a second. What is important to understand around both of these issues is this thing called executive control. Has anybody ever heard of this before? This is where my thinking about this actually does come from published literature. I will let you know, instead of just chatting with y'all and with my colleagues. So, has anybody ever heard of this concept of executive control?
No, I haven't heard it.
Nobody's heard it.
Nope.
I've heard about it.
You've heard of somebody, it's been whispered out there. Yeah, no, it's one of these. Okay, so this is basically when your mind is like, you make a decision to initiate activity in some areas. So this is exactly, Ramon, the scene of what you were just talking about, initiating activity. And it's broken down into two things, actually. There's two aspects that your mind is engaged in when you are deciding to engage in activity. And one of those is called goal shifting, and the other one is called rule activation. And this stuff is really interesting in terms of some of the implications for controlling distraction and for getting yourself actually to sit down and do the work. So the first thing is around this goal shifting thing. So the goal shifting aspect is actually, you've selected a goal and you want to do this. Is that difficult for people to, like, you have to study, but you're not sure what to study? Do people experience this at all? Is anybody experiencing it now?
I'd say I definitely experienced this.
What are you taking right now, Anjanette?
I'm taking all English courses.
Oh, well, then it's all the same class. No, so you have trouble figuring out, like, which one of these should I attend to right now?
Yeah, the issue for me right now has been picking which class to focus on, because since they're all English, it's a lot of reading and writing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, there's no, and I think it's also because of that it's like, that in a way is my distraction, because it's always the same thing.
Oh.
So there's no like diversity in what I'm doing with my schedule this year.
Right.
Well, yeah, so
does it feel sometimes like it's just like eating another bowl of oatmeal, just like it's the same stuff over and over?
Yep.
Yeah. So you're experiencing maybe some monotony or boredom with it. And so you are especially vulnerable to distraction. I can imagine that being really, and also, what makes it difficult? Like if you're deciding, oh, should I read, Shakespeare, or should I read, from this other class, or should I, why is that a difficult decision to make?
Sometimes it's not as difficult depending on what I'm reading. Like if I'm enjoying one literature, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick that. But
keep going.
If it's two novels that I'm like, okay, which one can I actually get through?
Right.
Then that's when it kind of becomes difficult.
Yeah. So we all find this moment where we're sitting like, okay, I know I have to work, but I've got so many responsibilities on me, and I've got 4 different deadlines, and this work is hard. That one's a little easy. And you're trying to make this like strategic decision, like at the moment. And then even if you have decided, okay, I got to read Moby Dick right now, right? You will be distracted by your own sense of, did I make the right decision about what to read? Have any of you been in that state where, well, most students find themselves in the state from time to time where they can't focus because they keep thinking about the other classes that they're not studying as they're trying to study for one class. And so they undermine their own attention with this issue of being kind of in flux around their goal direction. So that's why I was saying, David, starting your study session with a reassertion of this is what I'm doing and this is what my goals are is really smart. Okay, it sort of, grounds once again in, here's why I've made the decision to read this book, to do this. The other thing, and you'll see I have this up here, this is part of, a very detailed timeline plan. Did you all know that you can put all, 14, 16-hour days from here until finals? You can see them all on one sheet right now if you want to do detailed planning. Now, does anybody here do any kind of planning that sort of looks like this? Do you see what's going on the screen here? What do you notice?
There's time put aside for notes, and I'm not sure if they're from different classes, but there's time set aside for notes and lectures.
Yeah, so the 3 colors are 3 different classes, and it is specifically laid out what's going to happen when. Now, in many cases, I would not recommend this level of attention, but if you are having trouble, like, just sitting down to work, sometimes planning it out, and you have to actually believe in your plan. Like, you have to be able to look at it and say, yep, it's going to take me about that much time. I've planned this correctly. You have to believe in your plan, but it's sometimes going to be important to plan ahead, because this is the way that you keep your mind from having to do 2 things at once, right? Executive control demands that your mind both do goal shifting and this thing, rule activation, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And you want to lessen the load. The moment where the problem with focus is when you're trying to, is that, your mind is trying to.
Hey, everybody, can anybody hear me?
Yes.
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 I'm not sure what happened to Jay, but did her computer freeze for everybody?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, what a shame. Well, I hope we can get her back. I'm sure she's going to keep trying. And in the meantime, does anybody have any questions? We really appreciate you all hanging out. I know it's a little longer than you may have planned, but we're going to try to see if we can get back in touch with Jay. So hang in there for a moment, if you would. I know some of you may have to leave. So here's what I think we'll do. We have a list of who you all are, I hope. But we will try to schedule, perhaps I have a feeling Jay will be open to coming back and doing this again, or doing part 2 or something. But I know you all have things you need to be doing this evening, so I don't want to necessarily keep you longer. But we will be in touch with you via email, or find you some way, or put some additional information out there on the internet and social media and on Shoreline. If you want to send any questions to us for Jay, certainly give us a call at or send an email to the Alcohol and Drug Program, adp@sa.ucsb.edu. You can find us on the web, and we will make sure to be in touch with you to get you all back and see if we can do a part 2. I know that Jay will want to do that. So with that, I'll let you all go if you want to go. we'll hang out here a little bit if we need to, but you all be well, and thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Edwin.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure. Gosh, I was so excited to hear Jay speak. I wanted to hear more.